What up guys, it's Vicarate here, and welcome to my patch 6.0 WINDWALKER PvP guide. In this video I'll be talking to you guys about my hints and tricks on how to play WINDWALKER in PvP. So let's start off with the talent tree. Now the talent tree choices looks pretty much the same as in the last expansion, however I will still go through my thoughts and reasoning behind the choices. So in tier 1 we go with Tiger's Lust, because its ability to get out of roots and its speed increase. In tier 2 we still go with Chi Wave. It's still because it's the biggest damage increase and also the fastest heal out of the other choices. In tier 3 we still go with Chi Brew despite it having been nerfed from a 45-second cooldown to 1 minute, but it's still a really good engaged ability. It still gives you 2 Chi per use and a minimum of 2 stacks of Tiger Brew, and it still scales with mastery. Some people like to go with Ascension here, but with enough haste our rotation should be smooth enough not to need increased energy regen, and in WoD Trainer we already have a 5th Chi slot from our enhanced ability perk from leveling up. In tier 4 we go with Leg Sweep. Since Ring of Peace has been changed into an incapacitation effect, which is pretty much useless, Leg Sweep is the only viable option in my opinion. As always, tier 5 is very situational, and you should always go with healing elixirs for non-caster fights and use diffuse magic for all caster fights. In tier 6 I'm still using Rushing Jade Wind because I don't feel the rotation is slow enough to lose the AoE effect, and it's still so useful for catching stealth people off guard. Now tier 7 is the new level 100 talent tier, and if you don't know what these spells do, I've made a video for you guys to click on right here so you can know all about them. So after a lot of testing, I found out that Serenity is the best ability for bursting down a target and has paid off greatly in most of my cases. It also has proven to be a very quick way to build up Tiger Brews since you can spam Blackout Kick during the duration of the effect. The only problem is if you get CC during the effect, it's pretty much wasted, but with good timing or inexperienced opponents, this shouldn't be a problem. Some people might go for Chi Explosion here instead for some more reliable damage. I do however find this less effective than Serenity, since it more often than not consumes more Chi than you wanted to. You only really want to spend 2 or 3 Chi, but usually you would end up spending 4 Chi, and that slows down your rotation quite a lot. Hurricane Strike has shown great potential against single target fights, but still doesn't add up to the damage done by Serenity and becomes significantly weaker whenever there's multiple targets, such as pets. When it comes to Glyphs, it's a major problem right now, since there are 4 of them that are kinda mandatory, but there's only 3 Glyph slots. The Glyph of Freedom Roar used to be a bonus on our PvP gloves, but it's now a major glyph, which is a huge problem. However, since you can only have 3 of them, I've decided to use Glyph of Freedom Roar, Touch of Death, and Touch of Karma. The reason I didn't choose Paralysis is because it's been nerfed down to 4 seconds no matter what direction the enemy is facing, and it's no longer as effective for CCing, and I think that Glyph of Freedom Roll provides a much more needed boost to utility, which is really beneficial against classes that uses a lot of slows. I really do encourage you to go to either Twitter or the forums and complain about this change, because this should be streamlined into our gear and not a major glyph, and it's pretty stupid that Glyph of Freedom Roll even exists. Now the stat priority looks a little bit different because of the new stats that came along with WoD Trainer, and this might not be set in stone because it's still quite early in expansion, but I'm currently using Multi-Strike before Haste, before Versatility, before Crit, before Mastery, and I found that this works great for the rotation since Energy Salvation is still our biggest enemy. Also keep in mind that Hit and Expertise are completely gone from the game. Right, so our damage rotation looks pretty much the same as it used to do, but I still want to remind you one thing that's changed, which is that Fist of Fury now only stuns your target once, so it's even more important to follow up with a Leg Sweep directly afterwards. So rotation is as follows. You start off with Tiger Palm. You get 10 stacks of Tiger Brew, use Rising Sun Kick, Rushing Jade Wind into a Fist of Fury. Directly afterwards you use a Leg Sweep into Serenity, and then you spam Blackout Kicks. And that's pretty much it. If done correctly, you should be able to pull off around 8 to 10 Blackout Kicks during the duration of Serenity, and that should do a massive amount of damage. When it comes to macros, at first I want to say that these are only macros that I found useful, and there's probably more advanced or better ones out there, but I find these to be really helpful for my playstyle. And of course I'll put them all in the description box below, so you don't have to write them all yourself, you can just copy paste. The first macro is for Tiger's Lust. This cancels any interfering auras and casts Tiger's Lust onto your current target. It's got an alt modifier, which means that if you press the alt key whilst casting it, it'll be cast onto yourself. You just have to change the name Vicarate to your own name. Macro number 2 is only for us Night Elves. It cancels Rushing Jade Wind and casts Shadowmeld. I use this primarily to avoid big spells like Chaos Balls. By using this as soon as a Chaos Ball has been cast, you can actually nullify it. The third macro is for Rising Sun Kick. The macro casts Provoke and Rising Sun Kick at the target at the same time. The reason I'm using this is because Provoke can actually eat a Shaman's Grounding Totem. The fourth macro is for Touch of Karma and is quite simple. It casts Touch of Karma on the target, and if you have a focus target and press Control, it'll be cast onto the focus target instead. This can be quite useful for when you go in for a target such as a Paladin, which can easily bubble your Karma, and instead you can put it onto the focus target, which is quite situational. The fifth one is for paralysis. Same as before, it cancels any interfering auras, casts paralysis on the target or onto focus target by pressing control. Mockery number 6 is a fortifying brew. This one is for people like me who often forget to use the health stone that our Warlock friend so nicely provides us with. It simply uses it at the same time as you pop your fortifying brew. My 7th macro is my, well, let's call it my burst macro. It drinks all of the Tiger Eye brews I've collected, which should be 10, and also pops my used trinket. Macro number 8 is actually a dual macro. Without any modifiers, it'll cast Send Meditation, but if you press either Control or Alt, it'll cast Diffuse Magic if you're using that talent. Then my last macro is also very simple. It's my kick macro. It kicks my current target unless I press Alt to kick my focus target. See? Very simple. Let's talk about some useful add-ons. The most important one for arenas is Gladius EX. You can also get the more common one simply called Gladius. They're not that different, it's just a matter of taste and choice. This add-on replaces the default Blizzard UI frames but can be set to different sizes to fit your taste. It also tells you what spec your teammates and enemies are, when they use the trinket, what the cooldown is on the trinket, and some of the major CDs and spells that would greatly affect you. I would never PvP without it. Secondly, I'm using Tell Me When. This is a great CD tracking add-on that I use to keep track of my Tiger Pawn. It can be set to track anything you like and it's a great feature. Thirdly, I use OmniCC, which puts a CD timer on top of my abilities. This is a great way to check how long I've got to wait until my next ability is up again. Fourthly, I use Battleground Targets. This lets you see the class, spec and role of the enemy team in the battleground, and it's very useful for keeping track of who's carrying the flag and who's healing. Then the last add-on I want to recommend is Mixed Scrolling Battle Text, or MSBT for short. This one isn't essential, but I find it very neat and clean. It simply lets you filter any combat message like damage, healing, absorptions, etc. and puts it very nicely around your character instead of being spread out all over the place. Right, so let's talk about some of the most important changes for our classes expansion. First and foremost, which is the biggest change and nerf in my opinion, is Touch of Karma. It now only absorbs 50% of our maximum HP. This makes no sense whatsoever, since many other classes still have way stronger defensives like Ice Block ×2, Deterrence ×2, Paladin Bubbles, etc. Most people don't even bother CCing you during Touch of Karma anymore because you just burst right through it. This probably means that we'll more often not be the main target in Arena. Secondly, healing spheres are now gone and have been replaced by Surge and Mist, which in itself isn't a big deal. Instead of an instant cast, it's now a 1.4 second cast, and the problem lies within its strength. After some testing was having 100k HP, it only heals for about 9k, which isn't a lot, and we don't even have an instant cast like Ferals, Paladins and Enhancement Shamans. But this won't really matter as much in 3v3s at least, because our focus isn't enough healing anyways, so yeah. Thirdly, as I mentioned before, Fist of Fury now only stuns a target once. However, it will always do 100% of its damage to your main target, which means it will only split its damage between enemies you are not targeting, but it also requires the target to be in melee range, which is quite annoying. Fourthly, Transcendence is now on a 10-second cooldown and it can be cast instantly. The Transfer one is still on a 45-second cooldown, but it's also instant. This can be really useful for some good escape tricks. Fifthly, Jab now costs 45 energy, which isn't really doing much, but it's worth mentioning if you're still at lower levels and you feel like your rotation is somewhat slower. This becomes a lot better when you reach level 100 and you start getting more haste in your gear. Sixthly, as I also mentioned earlier, Paralysis has been nerfed to a 4-second CC regardless of the direction your target is facing, which means we've got way less CC than before. Seventhly, many abilities have been removed. Disarm, for example, has been removed for every class, not just for us. We also now only have one buff, but it does the same as the 2 did before. And our beloved Spinning Fire Blossom is now gone, which was such a great tool for catching up to kiting targets. Eighthly, this might be changed in the future, but currently our 2-set PvP bonus gives a 30 energy reduction cost to our jab every time we roll. This isn't a problem per se, but it feels like it's trying to force us to roll more often than we need to. So I advise you to see this as just a benefit and not a requirement, so only roll when we need to and not to get the reduction. And that about finishes off my guide for this time, guys. I really hope it helped you, and of course if you have any questions or need some clarification, feel free to leave a comment down below or hit me up on any of my social medias, which you can find in the information section down below. Thank you for watching, I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in my next video.